When I was 5, my grandmother told me my mom had died during childbirth. She said it gently, almost like she was telling me what the weather would be tomorrow. Then she added, "You were a miracle, but she had to go so you could stay." I nodded. I didn't really understand, and went back to coloring on the floor with my markers. Back then, death seemed magical, almost like a fairy tale. Like Mom was an angel who chose the sky instead of the earth. My name was Claire, full name Claire Mitchell. I grew up in Woodvale, Virginia, a small town where everyone knew everyone, where summer evenings smelled like hot asphalt and cornfields. My grandmother, Margaret, was strict but fair. She worked at the local library and made the best apple pie in the county. Her house was always quiet. Too quiet, sometimes. There was only one photo of my mom in the whole house. It stood on her dresser, a faded picture of a young woman in a white dress, with long blonde hair. The edges were torn, like someone had ripped it out of someone else's frame. When I asked what her name was, Grandma would just say, "Lena." No last name, no details. And I learned not to ask again. Sometimes at night, I heard my grandmother cry, softly, almost silently. I would tiptoe to her door and listen. A whisper, like a prayer. "Forgive me, Lena. God, forgive me." But in the morning, everything would be the same. Oatmeal with cinnamon. My school uniform ironed. The yellow bus waiting. And me, carrying a hole the size of a missing person inside my chest. Grandma never watched the news. Never talked about her youth. Never mentioned the past. Just books. And gardening. And silence. When I turned 18, I left for college in Richmond. Freedom felt wild. I wrote poems late at night. Fell in love with boys who were like cigarette smoke. Easy to breathe in, hard to hold, and gone before morning. But even then, even in someone else's bed, I sometimes saw her in my dreams. My mom. She'd be standing at a bus stop, holding my hand, saying, "I'm here, Claire. I'm always here." I'd wake up gasping, with a strange feeling in my chest, like someone had lied to me, like some part of me always knew. When I turned 30, Grandma died. A heart attack. Quick. Quiet. Just like her life. Only 5 people came to the funeral. The local pastor, her friend Dorothy, a neighbor who used to mow her lawn, and me. After the service, I started going through her things. Photos, letters, old recipe cards. And then, deep in a drawer, I found a plain envelope. No name. No stamp. Inside was a postcard. A scenic image. An empty autumn road lined with golden trees. And on the back, a woman's handwriting. "I'm alive, but Claire must never see me. That was the deal. Don't look for me. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. LD." I held it in my hands, and my hands started shaking. Grandma knew. She knew everything. And my mom. She wasn't dead. She was alive. Somewhere. Maybe just minutes away. That night, I walked outside the house. Stood at the edge of the driveway. The wind was soft. The trees rustled. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. My whole life was a story someone made up to protect me. A clean lie, wrapped in apple pie and bedtime stories. I didn't drive to Richmond that night, even though I could have, even though I wanted to. Instead, I stayed in my grandmother's house. I locked the door behind me and sat down on the kitchen floor. It still smelled like her. Cinnamon, wildflower tea, and old wood. This house was built in 1947 by her father. And now I sat here alone, holding a postcard, and trying to figure out if my mother was dead, or just chose not to be alive in my world. I looked at the card again, and wondered What if it wasn't even for me? What if I misunderstood? But no. The initials were there. LD. Lena Davis. I had seen that name only once. On my birth certificate when I was 16. I needed it to get a summer job at a kids' camp. I didn't think much of it then. Just a name. Without a face. Without a story. But now, it burned. Like a brand. Sometimes, I think my grandmother was afraid of me. Every time I asked questions, she stiffened. Her eyes darted away. Her mouth went tight. I used to think it was grief. Now I think it was guilt. I remember once I was maybe 10. I climbed into the attic and found a box. Baby shoes. A photo album. Letters. One envelope held a photo. A young woman holding a baby. She had my eyes. I ran downstairs. Photo pressed to my chest. Is this my mom? I asked. My grandmother yanked the picture from my hands. You shouldn't see this, she whispered. And cried. Back then I thought she cried from pain. Now I know. It was fear. A few days after the funeral, I stayed in town. I wandered into the public archives. Started digging through files no one cared about anymore. And there it was. In the marriage records. Lena Davis. Married Robert Davis in 1997. Maiden name Mitchell. I froze. Mitchell. That was my last name. Which meant she had once been Lena Mitchell. She was my mother. And she got married. When I was 6. That night, I sat in my grandmother's bedroom. For the first time since she died, I turned on the old lamp, sat on the edge of the bed, held a pillow, and whispered into the silence. Mom, can you hear me? Were you really here all this time? I grew up without you. I learned to ride a bike without you. I got sick without you. I watched other kids with their moms and wondered, why not me? I didn't cry. I just talked. Like to a wall that had been silent for 30 years. Like to a woman who walked out of a room where a baby was crying and never came back. The next morning I drove to Ashbury, just 3 miles away. They call it the next town over, but really it's just a short drive past the gas station. And you're there. At first, I just circled the streets, looking at faces, searching for something familiar. Eyes, a smile, a posture. And then I saw her. She was standing outside a grocery store, holding a bag of apples, talking to a man, laughing, smiling. She wore a blue dress and a light jacket. She looked how calm, alive, not like someone who had been lost. I stood across the street, watching, frozen. Then I saw a boy run up to her and say, Mom. She hugged him, touched his hair, so gently, so naturally. And I stood there, like a shadow, like a stranger, like a daughter no one expected. I didn't go up to her. I didn't yell. I didn't break the moment. I just walked away, got in my car, closed the door, and sat there holding the keys, refusing to turn them. Because somehow if I didn't start the engine, it wouldn't be real yet. But the moment I did, everything became true. I drove back, not home, because suddenly I realized something. I didn't know where home was anymore. I don't even know how many times I drove past that grocery store in Ashbury that week. Sometimes I just circled the block. Sometimes I parked and stared from the lot across the street. She showed up almost every day, with her son, with a grocery list, with her life. And every time I wondered, would she feel me near? Would she lift her head and recognize me? Would she stop mid-sentence and say, Claire, is that you? But she never looked my way. Not once. When I was 12, we had a school project. Draw your family. I drew Grandma. I drew myself. and then an empty space with the words, "Mom in Heaven." I didn't cry when I drew it. I thought it was beautiful, like a tribute, like my mom was special, a secret angel that only I had. But now I saw her hugging a teenager outside a grocery store, living 3 miles away from the girl who thought her mom wore wings, and smiling like nothing had ever been lost. I knew I had to talk to her. Just walk up and say it. "Hi, I'm Claire, the daughter you left behind." But every time I tried to open the door, something inside me locked up. Was it fear? Was it grief? Was it the child inside me begging, "Please don't break us again"? Because the second betrayal, it doesn't cut, it kills. I drove to Ashbury's town hall, pretended to be building a family tree, said I was curious about relatives. The woman at the desk printed the record without asking too much. Lena Davis, age 52, married to Robert Davis. 2 kids. Eli 17, Maggie 14. Maggie. The name hit like a punch. That was my grandmother's name. She named her daughter after the woman who raised me, after the woman who buried her pain every morning with a cup of tea and a silent sigh. I folded the printout, slid it into my coat pocket, not because I needed it, but because I couldn't throw away something that proved I wasn't crazy. She existed, and she lived just minutes from me, not as a ghost, but as a wife, a mother, a woman with a mailbox and a front porch. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in Grandma's bed, in the dark, hands under the pillow, eyes on the ceiling, and one question echoed. Why? Not why did she die, but why did she choose not to be my mother? Why did she walk away from a baby and never once walk back? I remembered the time I burned my hand on the iron. I was 7. Grandma ran for aloe and ice, and I sat on the floor, biting my lip, muttering, "I won't cry. Mom would want me to be strong." I really believed that, but now I knew. She didn't want anything from me, because she never even tried to know me. The next morning I woke up early, not because I was rested, but because something inside me needed to move. I dressed, grabbed the car keys, and drove to Riverbend Lane. House number 14. Red door. White mailbox. Davis in faded letters. I got out, took 2 steps toward the house, and stopped. I didn't know what I was going to say, or if I'd even get through the first word. But standing there, breathing that cold morning air, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't live in the in-between anymore. I couldn't be both the daughter of a dead woman and the secret child of one still living down the road. It had to be one or the other, and I was finally ready to choose. I stood in front of her house, and I couldn't feel my legs. The air felt thicker than it should. Birds were chirping. A dog barked somewhere in the back. And behind that red door was my mother. My mother. Even now, that word caught in my throat. I walked up the steps. The door was chipped, a little paint peeling at the edges. The doormat read "Home Sweet Home." There was a flower pot by the side, so ordinary it almost hurt. And then I knocked, not loudly, soft, hesitant, and immediately regretted not making it stronger. A few seconds later, the door opened. She stood there, no makeup, wearing a warm sweater, one hand still on the doorknob, like she hadn't decided whether to open or shut. We looked at each other. Just looked. "Claire?" She didn't ask. She knew. I nodded. Barely. She opened the door wider. "Do you want to come in?" "No," I said. I can't breathe in that house." She looked down. Didn't argue. The silence between us was heavy, and I hated how familiar she looked. "How come?" "I didn't know you." That I'd show up? That I existed? She flinched, and I knew she had imagined this moment. Maybe feared it, but definitely expected it. I was 19, she said. I was alone, your grandmother. Don't blame her, I interrupted. She was there. You weren't. She took the hit. Didn't push back. They said you'd be better off, that I was broken, not ready. And you agreed? I was scared. Well, I grew up motherless. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just said the words, one by one, like reading them from a page I'd memorized in the dark. And she just stood there, taking them in, like someone who had already played this scene in her head so many times, without knowing how it would end. When I had a fever, it was Grandma who held me. When I learned to drive, she was the one yelling in the passenger seat. When I felt invisible at school, she was the one who looked me in the eye and said I mattered. And still, I said, I wrote letters to you, letters I never sent, because I thought you were dead. Her eyes filled with tears, but none fell. I thought about you every day, she whispered. That's not the same as being there, I said. Then we both heard it. A voice from inside. Mom, who is it? A teenage boy. I saw him for just a second. Tall, freckled, looking at me like I was a stranger. And she said quickly, it's just someone I used to know. Just someone. Just. I swallowed the scream rising in my chest. The desire to yell, I'm her daughter. To break something. To force the truth out loud. But I didn't. I stood there, collected, cold, and said, I didn't come here to forgive you. I know, she said. I came because I'm tired of living with a hole shaped like your absence. She nodded. I can't give you the past, Claire. You can't. And I don't know if I deserve to be part of your future. You don't. She looked away. But I'm glad you came. I looked at her. At the woman I had invented and destroyed in my head 1,000 times. She was neither a monster, nor a savior. She was just a woman. A tired, real woman. Who made a choice once, and never stopped paying for it. I don't know if I'll ever come back, I said. I'm not asking you to. But if I do, will you? I'll leave the door open. She hesitated, then added, I kept a photo of you in the kitchen drawer. Every fall I baked the apple pie, the one your grandmother made, hoping, maybe, you were somewhere eating it too. And that broke something soft in me. Not rage, not grief, just silence, where love should have lived. I didn't hug her. She didn't cry. We didn't say goodbye. We were just two grown women who never got to be mother and daughter, and maybe never will. I walked back to the car, closed the door, sat there for a moment, and thought, now she knows. And now, I finally get to choose what comes next. When I got back to Woodvale, my grandmother's house didn't feel like home anymore. It didn't feel warm or safe, just quiet. Too quiet. Like her death had erased not just her, but the meaning of every sound inside those walls. I sat on the stairs for a long time, holding my coat, still smelling like my mother's doorway, and I asked myself, if she had come back when I was little, would I have forgiven her? And the silence answered back, with nothing. Later that night, I opened the drawer by the front door, the one Grandma never let me touch. Inside were old notes, photos, birthday cards I made her when I was 5, a calendar. Every year had little circles. She marked everything. Claire's first day of school, age 6. Lost her first tooth, 7. Cried after sleepover. Said she felt invisible, age 12. Tears came, but not all at once. Not dramatic, just steady. like something cracked inside me and had been leaking all along. I went for a drive. Didn't know where I was going. Just needed to move. To breathe. At one point, I saw myself in the rearview mirror. No makeup. Hair messy. Eyes swollen. And still, for the first time in years, I looked alive. I parked near the elementary school where I now worked. Sat on a bench by the playground. Watched kids run and yell and call for their moms. And I realized something I never said out loud. I never wanted to be a mother. Not because I didn't like kids, but because I was terrified that I'd become her, that I'd disappear. So I pushed love away. Good men. Real connection. All of it. Because I believed broken women pass on their breakage. And I refused to pass that curse. But now I saw the truth. I wasn't afraid of becoming her. I was afraid that I already had, that I was walking through life, detached, unavailable, half present, and calling it independence. The next morning I wrote an email. Not a letter. Just a short message. I found her email through a tax database. Yes, I know. I was spying. But I had to say something. Even if she never wrote back. _hi. I'm not sure what you felt after our meeting. I'm still figuring out what I feel too. But here's what I know. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. But I'm grateful you didn't lie. You didn't pretend. You didn't hide behind excuses. You stood there. Quiet. Honest. I think that takes pain. And maybe that's something we share. Claire _ I hit send. Wanted to take it back. Didn't. No reply. The next day. Or the day after. By the 4th, I'd already told myself it didn't matter. But then on the 5th, I got one line back. I don't deserve this chance. But if you knock again, I'll open the door, no questions. A week later, I went back. Not to her house. To myself. The version of me I'd avoided for years. I signed up for therapy. Called my ex, the one who left because he wanted a family. And I didn't. I told him, I'm not trying to get you back. I just need to say this. I pushed you away because I was scared and broken. But now, I think I'm only cracked. He was quiet for a long time. Then said, that's already something. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. Looked at my reflection. Same face. Same eyes. Same scar under my chin from the time I fell off my bike at 7. But this time I saw something new. Strength. Not the kind that clenches its jaw and hides, but the kind that finally breathes. And I said out loud, softly, I'm not her, but I'm not against her. I'm just me. And that's enough. It had been weeks since I saw her. Since I stood on that porch. Since I walked away. I thought it would feel lighter. It didn't. Not yet. But something inside me had shifted. Not like a healed wound. More like a decision. A quiet, slow decision to stop bleeding. I started walking every morning. No headphones. Just me. The cold air. And my breath. I didn't call anyone. Didn't post anything. Didn't explain. Because this wasn't a story for anyone else to witness. This was mine. To live. To feel. To undo. One afternoon, I opened my laptop. Typed in her name. Then erased it. Then typed it again. Eventually, I found her email. Buried in a tax listing site. It felt ridiculous. But I did it anyway. And then, I wrote, _hi. I don't know why I'm writing. Maybe because I needed to hear my own voice again. Maybe because I needed to know I could still speak. I'm not okay yet, but I'm moving. And that's something. I don't know what you hoped I'd say. I don't know if I'll ever say it. But you didn't lie. You didn't hide. And I see that. Claire _. I stared at the screen for a long time, then hit send. Felt my chest tighten, but I didn't take it back. She didn't answer the next day, or the next, but on the third day, a single reply. If you ever knock again, I'll open the door. No questions. I stared at those lines. They didn't make me cry. They didn't fix anything, but they didn't hurt either. And that was new. That evening, I sat in the hallway, right outside my grandmother's old bedroom, lit a candle, and whispered, I'm still here. I'm still learning how to stay. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was the first real choice I had made. Just for me. A few months passed. No big events. Just time doing what it does. Softly rearranging the furniture of your heart. Virginia's fall lingered longer than usual. The air was golden. The wind carried the smell of damp leaves and burnt wood. I sat on my grandmother's porch, wrapped in her old wool blanket, writing a letter I would never send. By hand, with blue ink, on yellowed paper from the bottom of her drawer. It wasn't an apology, or a request. It was a release. Hi Mom. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not ready to love you either. I'm just trying to breathe without ghosts in my lungs. I used to wait for you, quietly, in my sleep, but now, I'm choosing to wake up. You don't have to reply. You don't even have to read this. This letter is for me. For the part of me that's tired of standing in the doorway of someone else's absence. I folded the letter, wrote her name on the envelope, but didn't seal it, didn't mail it, just tucked it between the pages of a book I never finished. On Halloween, I gave out candy to neighborhood kids, wore a pointy witch hat, laughed, for real. Then I saw her, Maggie, her daughter, my not-quite sister, the one named after the woman who raised me. She ran up, grinning through a plastic tiara, and said, Your hair is so pretty. I smiled back, So is yours. And she ran off again. She didn't know who I was, and I didn't tell her. But in that tiny moment, something inside me softened. The kind of softness that doesn't collapse. It steadies. That night, I sat in bed, turned off the light, watched the ceiling flicker from the street lamp outside, and for the first time, the quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I wasn't holding space for a ghost anymore. I was simply resting, in my own skin. A week later, I walked through my grandmother's garden, dry leaves underfoot, the smell of earth, clean and cold. And there it was, a flower, small, blue, blooming too early for spring, too late for fall, but it bloomed anyway. I knelt down beside it, touched the edge of the petal, and whispered to no one, I'm blooming too, even if it's not on schedule. And maybe that's the whole point. Not to be on time, not to be perfect, just to grow anyway. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like light pouring in. Sometimes it looks like roots digging deep in quiet soil, and choosing to stay, even when no one sees you yet.